our website.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Or I guess good afternoon. I am all over the place timeline-wise. I know I usually have this show broadcast live from Fredericton, but today I am live from my brother's basement in Edmonton, Alberta, and our lovely guest Shaleen is live from Halifax. So if this is your first time tuning in, this is the show Crazy Talk, where we talk about all things mental health related. We have a little bit of fun. We're a little bit sassy. We're a little bit out there, and it's going to be totally awesome. I'm your host, Lee Thomas. If you want to get in touch with me, it's facebook.com/Lee Thomas Speaks. And our wonderful guest today, just an incredible person. I'm so excited to have her on the show. Again, joining us live from Halifax, Nova Scotia, where it is apparently beautiful and snowy, is Shaleen Jones. Shaleen is the former executive director of Peer Support Canada. And I just want to get this right, the current National Associate Director of Peer Support for the Canadian Mental Health Association. Did I get that right, Shaleen?
You nailed it, Lee.
Fabulous. All right, Shaleen, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. It's super fun. And I am in cold, snowy Halifax this morning, although it's only 12:30 my time. So I got like my blanket on and trying to stay warm in our cold
staying cozy on the show. I love it. This is like, it's just chill. It's like we're catching you, Christmas morning, except, it's 2 days before. Yeah. So, and especially thank you for making time to join us, during the holidays, which I know is just a chaotic time for everybody. Here I am, forgetting time zones and forgetting days, and it's been a good time.
It's amazing. Like we switch from being like in work mode and being like, how much can I get done in this time zone, and then vacation hits, and we're like, I'll get dressed at some point today, and it's such a needed everything.
As soon as my like automatic email replies go on, like as soon as it's like, oh well, they're getting an email saying I'm out of the office, I'm like, okay, my life is like, I'm gonna put my feet up, I'm gonna eat Rice Krispie squares for breakfast, and it's gonna be awesome.
That's totally a breakfast food.
I know, it's basically cereal.
It is, yeah.
So Shaleen, you are super involved with peer support within Canada, hence, all of your amazing, wonderful work. Can you tell us a little bit about why you got involved in peer support to begin with?
Yeah. Well, I started volunteering in the early 90s. I'm from Victoria, from BC. And I had dealt with an eating disorder as a teenager and as a young person. And as I was going through my recovery process, I got involved with a community-based organization. And I started volunteering there and kind of getting to know the people there who are kind of like me, who had been through something and were like in recovery and fighting really hard to be in recovery. And it was such a beautiful community to be a part of. And after I'd been there for a while and was pretty solid in my own recovery, there was an opportunity to take this training called the Peer Project, which was like everyone has that name, the Peer Project, but it was a peer support training program for folks who had recovered from eating disorders to support other people. So this was back in like 94, I want to say. So I thought it was really interesting and signed up and did this training and met like an amazing group of people who were being trained as well. And so that was kind of my first real taste of peer support. And for me, it was completely transformative because it gave me a framework and some tools to take my own experience and my own experience through a recovery process and to use that to support others who were earlier in the recovery path than I currently was. And I kind of felt like I could, it was like peer support was like the flashlight that I could use to like guide someone forward in their own path. So that was my first introduction to peer support, and I was completely hooked. I know that for me, being involved in a supportive community of folks who were like me, it helped me make sense of my recovery process. It provided me with context. It provided me with a way of being really honest with myself through my recovery, knowing that there was no judgment, there was just support and understanding, and that I could make mistakes, but we were all committed to a recovery. So being part of that community was completely transformative for me. So that's kind of how I got my first connection to peer support. And since then, I've been working in mental health and peer support. with community organizations pretty much since the 90s. And I worked with Langhouse. I served as their executive director for a couple of years, which is a phenomenal youth-driven, youth-based peer support organization here in Halifax. So to me, peer support is so magical because it takes what had been a vulnerability or a liability even, really what could have been a really distressing life event or, experience, and moves it from being a vulnerability to it being a strength. And I think as we move forward from, not engaging folks in decision making that affects their lives to engaging folks who have lived experience and recognizing the value that experience brings, I think we really see more folks embracing peer support as it kind of lines up with other movements around really valuing the unique experience that you have when you have lived through something.
Yeah, because I was kind of thinking about that where, you're talking about how being involved in peer support since the 90s, but it does seem like peer support for a lot of people, I don't want to say trendy in like a bad way, but it's something that a lot of people are talking about right now, right? Like peer support is something that a lot of organizations are getting on board with who, and they might not have been like shunning peer support before, but they just weren't necessarily doing it or involved with it before. So do you feel like it's kind of like this is the time, like this is peer support's time to blossom? Like is that the feeling that you have, or is it just like, oh, we've always been doing this?
And having done peer support in the 90s, like no one was doing it, and like it was just like it was so new then, and people were still, clinicians that I worked with back then, 20 years ago, were still saying like, do people recover? Like, is this a thing? Like, is this even possible? And people were much more recovery oriented in our healthcare systems and our thinking now. And I think as we've made progress with that perspective and seeing that people can and do recover and that we're not just an illness, and as our demographics have changed too, I think that peer support, like you said, is being more accepted and is better understood about what it was. And people are looking at how do we tap into this resource, and how do we organize it so that we can offer peer support to folks who could benefit from it in a way that's going to be safe and effective, not just for those who are receiving the peer support, but those who are providing it too.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on just at the beginning, you talked about how, clinicians at the time were like, is recovery even possible? Is that a thing? Are there other kind of, I guess, misconceptions that you think still exist kind of around peer support?
Yeah. And, my background has been a lot around eating disorders peer support, where there's so much stigma and so much, there's so many shifts that are happening around seeing that folks who have that experience have agency and are able to make decisions for themselves. I'm sorry, I totally lost track of your question.
No. We're just talking about misconceptions around peer support, like kind of myths versus myth busting, I guess, around peer support.
Yeah. So I think the big thing is that there's different types of peer support, and peer support kind of exists on a continuum. So if you and your neighbor are connecting around something you both struggle with over the back of the fence in your backyard, like you're supporting each other and your peers in that experience of like parenting or loss or whatever it is. That's like a really informal type of peer support that we almost all do naturally, where we say, oh, I felt that way too, and I can understand, this is what I tried. And I think that's so much a part of our natural human experience, where we're trying to connect with others, and that's beautiful and valid and great. What we talk about peer support is more of a kind of a capital P, capital S peer support. So it's more intentional. It does happen organically all the time. But this type of peer support that we talk about at Peer Support Canada is where you are intentionally connecting with another person, drawing upon your lived experience, and focusing on helping that person move forward in their life. However, much more focused on the person who you are supporting than yourself, and it's using your experience as a tool to help that person. So you're able to connect around that and establish trust and provide some hope, and it's really rooted in your own experience. But it's not about us. It's not about you. It's about the person that you're supporting. So it's a bit more structured and intentional that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I keep going, like, you keep saying really interesting things, and I'm like, oh, I want to go back to this. I want to go back to this. This isn't directly peer support related. This is more eating disorder related, which I know is a field that both of us through our experience, are really interested in. So you talked about individuals having autonomy and being able to make choices, which I think is such an important philosophy and it's such an important fact, including people who have mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've kind of developed my own thoughts around this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, is the idea that, because individuals, and so for instance, I had bulimia where it's very action based, binging, purging. How do you reconcile the idea of I'm an individual who's able to make choices versus I am choosing to have an eating disorder, which I know those things aren't the same, but sometimes people have a hard time parsing that apart. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think, maybe I was quoting her name. I think Jay Schaefer wrote a book called Goodbye Ad. And I think that can be a really helpful approach to look at externalizing the eating disorder from who we are as people. And when you can separate those two and think, this is the eating disorder's mindset, or this is the eating disorder's voice from this is what I want. If you can tease those two apart, it's much easier to focus on self-determination of the individual separate from the eating disorder.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I like that. Because I do feel and this is kind of my own personal thinking, is that people, and we know that there are different degrees of stigma for different mental health issues, and it's not in order to be oh, well, I face more stigma than you do. It's not about that at all, but we know that people have a harder time, members of the public sometimes have a harder time coming to terms with certain mental health issues. And I feel like people really feel a lot of stigma towards mental health issues where they feel as though there's an element of choice.
Yeah.
So things like eating disorders and things, any time where they feel oh, so this person is choosing to behave in this way.
Stop doing that.
Yeah, just stop doing that. As if it's that easy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how with eating disorders, and this is kind of my pet area, I have such a connection to this world, but there is so much blame and the belief that it's about vanity, and it's just you want to do this thing, and so you're doing it, and you should just step out of it. And we are beginning to understand how much of are at play, not just with genetics, but with hunger cues and gut bacteria. It's such a complicated illness. And that, when you have all these things come together, they click, and it's really challenging to just stop the behavior because you're getting so many biofeedback loops around it.
Yeah, definitely. And there's just, we could talk about eating disorders all day because there is just so much to dig into there, because I think, and again, not to play the hierarchy game with stigmas, but I do feel that there is a lot of stigma around eating disorders still. And that stigma can come in a variety of forms. There's the stigma of oh, well, it's just not that big of a deal, or the stigma of oh, well, that couldn't happen to my child, to my parent, to my sibling, because it doesn't affect very many people, or the idea that everyone with an eating disorder looks and acts a certain way. There's so much stigma out there around eating disorders still.
And it's such a area too, because it's if with depression, oh, well, you're only depressed if you look like this, and you're only depressed if you are staying in bed all day and crying. And that's there are so many different faces of depression and present so many different ways. And it's the same with eating disorders. And the vast majority of folks with eating disorders aren't underweight and don't have anorexia. That's not the most common, and yet that's what we see over and over again.
Yeah.
And a lot of our treatment modalities are based around this tiny portion. So, I think we could talk about this at length. And it's the mental illness with the highest mortality rate, and the funding for treatment is like many things, you wait to stage 4, with all mental illnesses, until you have any help that's available. So
yeah. which
the end of my
no, and it doesn't have to be, is all I'm saying. So in terms of kind of that idea of people needing to be at stage 4, like, they need to be at their absolute sickest, they need to like rock bottom or like whatever you want to call it, like that whole idea that like you can get help when you're sicker, whereas it's unlikely that people would be like, well, we're gonna wait till that leg is a little more broken before we fix it.
Yeah.
Do you see peer support as kind of being a tier where people can get help before they're at that really sick stage?
It's like the right care at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in this country where we really believe like psychiatry is like, that's where you should be going. If you have a problem, like get thee to a psychiatrist or even a psychologist. And there's definitely like a hierarchy of treatment providers. But with peer support, I think it's a modality that can be deployed in so many different ways. And for folks who are early in experiencing an onset of an illness, that's a great place for peer support. For those who are in treatment, for those who have completed a treatment program and need some additional support. So like at any time along the continuum is a good time to deploy peer support. So it's a very versatile tool that we have.
Yeah. And do you find, because I feel like so much of mental health and mental illness in general is that feeling of aloneness. You know what I mean? Like that feeling of I'm the only person who feels this way and therefore, I'm a monster kind of thing. Or at least that was my own experience. And so I really do feel like peer support kind of balances that out or negates that or whatever. Like it looks it right in the eye and says, you're not alone. You're not the only person who's gone through this.
Exactly. And I think it, is that magical quality of hope of being able to say, like, I've been there and it does get better. And, I can understand what you're going through. And I think that's, it's really, really powerful. And at the same time, I think I want to mention for many of us who have been through a recovery process and are vocal about it, or, who are kind of out, there's always that chance to be like the poster child for mental health recovery. And like, oh, you're all better now. Like go on every TV show and like dredge up your soul so that we can understand things a bit more, which is, important and also like incredible emotional work to do this, real emotional labor. And I think that's why it's so essential to be trained to do peer support work. You have to have innate qualities to be a good peer supporter. You have to, genuinely care about people and have great empathy and all this other qualities that we have. But that's not enough to be a good peer supporter. Training that focuses on like establishing and maintaining really strong boundaries, protecting yourself, working through any traumas you have, really importance of self-care and debriefing and having someone else that you can get support from. As well as all those, communication skills and tools and, knowing about resources available in your community and how to navigate things. But peer support work is emotional labor. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why when we're talking about intentional peer support, it's essential that we receive training, that we participate in specific training to equip us to do the job so that it's safe for us and it's safe for those that we're supporting.
Yeah, and so that training, because I know like I went to the National Conference on Peer Support 2 years ago when it was in Toronto, and I went with the intention like through a company that I was working for at the time, and what we were really trying to find out is like, what does training for peer support look like? Because we wanted to like work on setting up peer supports with some of the organizations we worked with, and kind of the answer that I got from the conference is like, it looks different in every province, or if there's not a provincial peer support training strategy, then in every organization. So if someone was like, I want to get peer support training, they can't, just like when I teach mental health first aid, one of the things I always say in mental health first aid is like, this training trains you to be a mental health first aider. It does not train you to, be a peer supporter. So if someone was looking for a peer support training, if they were like, I think I do have those innate qualities to be a peer supporter, what do I do now? What could they do? Who could they reach out to find a training?
Absolutely call us, call Peer Support Canada. They can go to our website. Coming soon, we'll have an inventory of peer support training programs that are available across the country. It's very much patchwork style right now, where some provinces say this is the training we're going to have, and it's provincially funded. In other provinces, there may be half a dozen groups who are offering training at different prices. So there's a lot of differences geographically across the country in terms of what you can get. Some peer support training is 90 hours and a practicum. Some are 2 days. So there's a huge variance across the board around what kind of training is out there. So I would say the Mental Health Commission of Canada had produced a report on the guidelines for training. So download that. It's free. You can get it from our website. And when you're looking at a training program, or you're looking to develop a training program, that's like a really amazing resource to pull from. And then if you are with an organization, talk to other peer support organizations out there. We have such great ideas and projects in this country, and we're not always so great at connecting to others and doing that knowledge exchange piece. So before you start from scratch, connect with some other groups who are in your field, and see if they have some tips or some things they can share back with you. So like scaling up training that already is there.
Yeah.
If you're looking at accessing a peer support training program, some things to think about. What will you get out of the training? I really recommend training that gives you a chance to really develop and practice and deepen your skills as a peer supporter. So, a classroom style peer support training where you're just, there to absorb information may not equip you as well as if you're really practicing those skills and talking about some of the difficulties that come up with it.
Yeah.
And I know there are,
Yeah, and I just looking at some of the comments. Lori Young, who I know is the peer support specialist, I might not get her title perfectly right, but the peer support specialist for CMHA in New Brunswick. So shout out to Lori. Hi, Lori. Wanted to mention that New Brunswick does offer a 2-week training, and I know a couple of people who have gone through that training, and they've said it's so good. I know peer support training is something that New Brunswick is really, really trying to implement, or not is implementing, really, really trying to focus on, I guess. And so if you're in New Brunswick, reach out to your local CMHA and find out more information about that training. And speaking of the CMHA, so Peer Support Canada has partnered with CMHA, which is really, really cool. Do you want to tell us a bit about that partnership?
Yeah, it's really exciting for us. It's we just kind of announced it a couple days ago. So back when I started, always a long rambling story, Lee, right? I can't just answer a question short.
No, I love it.
And I'm so cold. So when I started as executive director with Peer Support Canada in late 2016, I was really curious about what is the landscape now for peer support. And most of my work had focused on Nova Scotia. Mm-hmm. So I was curious, what is happening for the rest of Canada, and how do we really grow peer support for the country? There's so many pockets of amazing work happening, like in New Brunswick and other places across Canada. And then there are places where there's nothing happening, no resources, no training. Like you couldn't be a peer supporter if you wanted to, because it's not a thing there. There's no structure for it. So we went back to our stakeholders and did a community consultation to hear what was needed to grow peer support, to make it more accessible for folks who may benefit from it, to raise the profile and awareness of it and what it could do. So we heard back from the community, and we heard a lot about, training and accreditation of training programs and places to do online learning and knowledge exchange and knowledge transfer and all these awesome things. I'm like, yes, we need to do it all. This is what we need to do. Advocating for increased funding and for just development in this area. So we were really excited by that. And then we looked at our own organization, and we're 1.5 people. We're very small. With no core government funding. We really just kind of operate on a shoestring. So as we looked at these results and did some real soul searching with the board level, we realized that by ourselves, we were not going to get there in the next couple of years. We would get there eventually, but we'd be needing to focus like most of our energies on sustainability of the organization and raising funds and like those structural pieces. And so we started thinking about like who else can we work with to really make this happen. And so CMHA appeared, and their branches are like everywhere across the country. They've got such a strong infrastructure and such a thorough reach across the country. And many of the branches have amazing peer support programs and peer support training, and they're doing the work on the ground and supporting peer supporters right now. But they also have the national reach that we really wanted to tap into. So they would be able to kind of amplify our voice at tables around advocating for peer support and putting some of those needed structures in place to really grow peer support across the country. So, the board, did some research and many conversations, and we thought this would be a great partnership and a great fit for us, that we could work in collaboration with a strong national organization that does amazing work around policy and advocacy, and really work together to grow peer support. So we're now a part of CMHA.
Yeah, which is very exciting.
We still are Peer Support Canada. Yay! It's all 2018, so we all do. So, our structure, our staff, myself and Lauren, our certification coordinator, our certified peer support mentors, and the certification committee that oversees every part of the process of certification. All that remains intact, and the certification committee remains there to oversee the whole process, and they really own the certification process, but we're sharing kind of back office operations and working really collaboratively now, so it's great.
Oh, I'm so excited, and it's CMHA's 100th anniversary in 2018, so it's like it's a great time. Let me tell you, I'm really excited about all of it. So I can't believe we're almost out of time, which is wild. This time just flies by. So if someone is looking to kind of keep the conversation going around peer support, or if they're looking to, get in touch with you and find out more information, how can people do that?
Yeah, go to our brand new website. It's peersupportcanada.ca. It's new. It's like a week old, so check it out. We'll sure have some updates as time moves on. So you can go there and you can access like all of our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and our emails are there as well. So do check us out. And there's information there about the peer support certification process and what that entails. So yeah, check it out.
All right, fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Shaleen, just for being on the show, as well as just for all the work you do, because you're making such a huge difference, and I feel not to get too cheesy, but it is Christmas time, so I feel just really blessed to know you. So I'm really glad that you were able to make it on the show.
Thanks. And I feel so honored to know you too, and I'm glad that our paths crossed when we were tweeting at a conference a few years back.
And that's Twitter friends to real friends. It's incredible. And also thanks to everyone who tuned in. I know this has been a really great show, and I'm so glad that you were all a part of it. Special shout out to Laura Young for leaving some comments, because we love getting comments. In the meantime, we're gonna have a show, another Crazy Talk next week, next Saturday. Always Saturdays, always at 12:30 Atlantic time. In the meantime, if you want to see more mental health stuff, if you want to see more of my face, you can check out my Facebook page at facebook.com/LeeThomasSpeaks. And be sure to check out Crazy Talk next week, same time, same place. We're going to be interviewing Carrie Gaskin from Coverdale Counseling and Consulting. She's going to be talking about self-care. So tune in next week. Thanks all of you so much, and have a very happy holiday, everyone. All right, take care.
Bye.